Hi, welcome to the Nice Business Podcast with me, Richard Train. I am a leadership consultant and Vistage CEO Peer Advisory Chair, and with over 30 years of business experience. And the purpose of this podcast is to have short but meaningful discussions about the people and culture side of business and how owners and executives can be both kind and successful. And today, I have the pleasure of speaking with Megan Steckly of Compudopt. And Megan has a very compelling topic that we want to talk about, and it is essentially managing a workforce in lieu of a reduction in force. And so, Megan, I'm not going to go into too much of the details of this. Tell us a little bit about you and about Compudopt, and kind of set up the situation for us, and we can get into it.
Yeah, well, Richard, thank you so much for having me on this. I'm really honored to be a part of it, and certainly support the conversation around kindness and leadership. I've been the CEO for Compudopt for 10 years. We are a nonprofit organization based out of Houston, Texas, that has grown substantially over the period of time, both particularly during COVID, but of the last 18 years. So we are the largest nonprofit now in the country that has a complete digital divide solution. And what I mean by that is we take donated corporate computers and we wipe and refurbish those, and then we hand them back out to kids and families that don't have access to their own computers at home. We are also an internet service provider, and we offer sponsored plans and low-cost internet connectivity for community members in need of that as well. And then finally, we round out our service offering with both digital literacy and technology educations programs that are all aligned towards workforce. And we really see ourselves not so much as just providing families with a tool that's needed to do things, but we really see our work about changing economic mobility in communities and helping lift households out of poverty overall. So that's a little bit about us. We're happy to be here.
Well, great. I appreciate that, and I think that y'all are doing just amazing work. I can't wait to come by and visit you at some point, because I'm also in the Houston area, and just see your operation up close and personal. But I know that you and I were talking earlier about just kind of a recent situation that you had anticipated happening that didn't happen, and what that did to your workforce. So I know that, and so just kind of as part of a setup, I know that most businesses, I've encountered this as a Vistage chair, I've encountered this in my consultancy, that oftentimes organizations bank on having something happen and it doesn't happen. And then what do you do after all of that preparation to still manage your people and do it in a way that is right, and that still helps to make sure that the business continues? So tell us a little bit about your situation.
Yeah, absolutely. And again, I think sort of setting the scene, right? We had decided to nationalize our organization in 2019. We were in Houston only at that time, serving about 3,500 kids a year on a $2 million operating budget. We walked into 2025 with a $62 million operating budget. We'll impact 300,000 people this year in 66 cities in 28 states across the U.S. And so you can do the math on the scale of growth there, but it's been really substantial. And as part of that, 3 years ago, when the infrastructure bill was passed, there was $45 billion in infrastructure funds that were dedicated towards broadband deployment and device access deployment. And all aimed at sort of helping close the digital divide. Now, positioned as one of the largest nonprofits in the country that does this work, and it has a complete solution for doing this work, we were very, very well positioned to receive a substantial amount of that funding. And had a number of really positive conversations about what that would look like as dollars were continuing to be decided upon and divided amongst the states. We took a conservative approach walking into 2025, and while we would have been eligible for kind of the hundreds of millions of dollars of transformational funding through that, we decided to only put $28 million into our $62 million operating budget of federal funds. And again, this was three years in planning, right? We also knew, having done this really substantial jump in growth previously, we knew some of the pitfalls of accepting really significant increases in dollars in philanthropy, and the impact that can have on our organization across everything, from culture, from just operational logistics, from the number of bodies that you need doing things. Scale requires a ton of resources and a lot of organizational shifts. And so, in mind of trying to be kind to our staff as well as to ourselves and plan better for this significant jump, we started bringing on headcount earlier in the process. Seeing this money was already passed through Congress, et cetera. And so coming into this year, we were really poised to deliver not just 300,000 points of impact in community members served, but more than double that, right? And so obviously the headcount had to come alongside that. So that's where we found ourselves in Q1 of this year, as the discussions started happening around what kind of funding support would exist for nonprofits, and particularly what kind of funding support would continue to exist within this BEAD and Digital Equity Act dollars, which is where these dollars had been allocated. And from there, after a quarter of talking to our state senators and a number of other political parties to try and get a better feel for what the future was going to look like, by the end of March, we really had to start having some difficult conversations.
Can we go back to one thing that I want to focus on? I mean, so where were you as far as your head count before you started the ramp up? And then where did you end up? And then where did you wind up afterwards?
Yeah, so, we had about 10 staff in 2019. Okay. And by 2021, 2022, we were upwards of around 100. And coming in this year, we had about 202 individuals. Wow. Yep.
That's a heck of a ramp up.
Yeah, it is. It's a heck of a ramp up.
And when you're scaling, I understand that's you do what you need to do to be able to handle the volume. Now, I'm just kind of curious because I'm not as familiar with that particular world. When you are bringing on staff for this, is this typically kind of a transient staff? Do they understand that this is contract work and not necessarily full-time, long-term career type work? Or does it kind of depend on the situation?
It does depend on the situation. I would say greater than 90% of the positions that we scaled into were either part-time or full-time positions, and the vast majority being full-time positions. And I think, part of the planning for this was, okay, we're going to slowly-ish ramp up into where we see opportunity for this. We also had a need for significant capacity increases just with our existing scaling. And so, the addition of headcount for this particular strategic approach was probably maybe 10% of those numbers that I quoted. And I would say that all of those were full-time positions, and they were probably mostly mid-tier managerial positions that were adding capacity to be able to manage greater numbers of, so that we could, spread the love around, right? Yeah, and not have so much management burden on both our more strategic thinking director and VP level staff, but also have more support for our boots on the ground, training level staff, particularly because we were hiring a lot of that body of people to be deploying the work, and they just needed more support, right?
Right. I'm assuming that there were programs that you had as far as your training for those boots on the ground staff on how to do the deployment. So there was a training component. There was a managerial component, along with a variety of HR components and things like that. So it wasn't just adding bodies. These were specific bodies for specific types of work. And you said only 10% was for that additional policy change. So you were already growing anyway.
We were already growing anyway, right? So that 2 million to the 62 million, if we take the federal funding out, it's 2 million to 35 million.
Right.
That was non-government funding that we needed to be staffing and supporting that scale with as well.
Right.
A piece of that was because in 2021 we closed a $35 million gift from a publicly listed company called Santander Consumer USA, which is part of a Spanish bank. And those funds were exponentially critical to our kind of catalytic level of growth. And we also knew that project, that grant funding, would end in 2026, which if we're putting the numbers together, right, we can sort of see, okay, we are anticipating a cliff, which we started to plan for in 2025. This opportunity around federal funding was, yes, going to increase exponential growth, but we also knew that we were going to decrease our philanthropic funding just by meeting this cliff of this very significant gift that we had by that point, fulfilled all of the obligations around. So we were backfilling some funding and we were adding some exponential growth on top of it. So that's sort of why, the numbers end up kind of coming out in the wash as like, well, it's a 50% or, you're almost doubling the overall budget size, but why weren't you doubling the headcount size? And a part of that is, number one, we got more efficient. Number two, we deployed better systems. And number three, we were doing this backfill, right, where we knew that
right.
we were going to have to, we'd have extra capacity available. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So, what happened at that point?
Well, first of all, I think, my team, my C-suite leadership team in particular, just deserves a huge shout out because they were just extraordinary in this particular period of time. And, if I would offer any advice for organizations or leaders that are going through this, lean into your whole team. And reduction in force conversations, I think this is maybe one of the most difficult things I've had to do in my whole career on every aspect of, realigning strategy, but also just the emotional piece of having to make decisions about what positions are eliminated and therefore then losing great people that have made meaningful contributions to the work and are in some cases, friends. And so I think there's a tendency for leaders to take that on their own shoulders alone. I fall victim to that on a somewhat regular basis. And yet, I think what got us most successfully through this was that the partnership between me and the rest of my, peer C-suite leadership team made sure that we balanced things out for each other, that we, all committed to making hard decisions. It wasn't just on one person. And that we supported the planning and the workload exchange that would then need to be, reallocated maybe across teams and across work streams. And while I was definitely the instigator in leading and saying, now's the time, right? This is what we're going to need to do. And I need us all dug in on this. They were the ones that stepped up and showed up and said, all right, let's go. Let's figure out what needs to happen. What's most important to us? How transparent can we possibly be in this communication so that we are balancing, not wanting to cause a huge amount of disruption or worry or anxiety or pain unnecessarily for our staff. And at the same time, hopefully make sure that they are hearing as transparently as we can, as quickly as we can, all of the decision making and the rationale behind it so that they feel good about the direction forward and confident that the organization is still strong and stable. And that is a really challenging, thing to balance when you're also, kind of having your own emotional experience about pushing through. Yeah. And they just did an unbelievable job. Yeah.
Now, this is one of the reasons why I really wanted to have this discussion with you, because doing what I do in consulting and working with executives, one of the biggest things that I like to talk about is how important it is to be transparent, like you just talked about, making sure that everybody that works with you in your C-suite and for you underneath understands the why of what it is that we are doing, what we're doing, not just for the reduction in force, but also for everything that you do as an organization. And if there is that back and forth communication effectively, and people understand the why are we here, why are we doing what we're doing, why are we doing it the way that we're doing it, then when there is an issue that arises, whether it's a reduction in force or anything else, there is already an established level of communication that helps you to do that hard thing in talking about this is what we have to do, and this is what we're going to do in order to make this as easy on all of us as possible throughout this time. I know that you were talking earlier in our prior conversation about the plan that you had to come up with in order to have those communications. Can you say more about that?
Yeah. You know, I think in some ways it starts with acknowledging different learning styles and different listening styles alongside that. And we know that we've got team members who they want to hear it from me, right? And so we hosted, you know, in our plan, we're like, okay, we're gonna have meetings with our VP team. I'm going to present this information. We're going to talk to them about what talking points we're giving them so that we're all on the same page and that there's consistency in our messaging, which was really critical. And then we're going to have another, you know, kind of all hands meeting. And again, I will present that information first, and then it's, you know, the message is reinforced by the work stream leads, and you know, it was really structured within the communication side of things. And you know, I'm kind of I don't ever script speeches, and you know, I'm an off-the-cuff communicator for the most part, but we were really intentional about actually writing out the language, making sure that it was resonant, making sure it was representative and honest, and then, you know, and kind of sequencing it. And then in addition to, of course, these in-person meetings and coming back to how people listen or how people receive information, we made sure that we had, you know, email communications. We opened up a feedback loop box that was anonymous, so people could just tell us how they were feeling. You know, we were also intentional in the communications around, like, we did a total of 41 head count that was reduced, and we broke into 2 teams. And so me and my COO, for example, we did 23 of the layoffs directly ourselves, and my other two of my other C-suite took the other 21 plus, you know, humans, and we did it all in a day, which was just brutal. And at the same time, it meant that people weren't waiting the next day to know, you know, if something was going on with them, and that was part of the communications. And then I think maybe the final piece that I think was also important and effective was that we planned the follow-up communications. It didn't just stop with what are we preceding this event with, but also like all the way through what happens afterward. You know, we did a in-person.
These are discussions that you had with the entire staff?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Good.
And,
Good.
You know, kind of senior leadership, and like, you know, we planned, you know, and there was a lot of discussion around this because of the cost, but we did an in-person. We flew our senior leadership team in person to meet together in Chicago within about 6 weeks. I think it was 4 to 6 weeks after the reduction in force. And, you know, it's the best thing. It's one of the best things that we did. And it was really hard, and it was kind of a mess. And no, we didn't make a ton of progress on the organizational strategic goals in that particular dialogue. But what we did do was some pretty major bridge building, and we held space for people to talk about how difficult things were, and to be confused and to be a little bit suspect of the stability of the organization and to ask us hard questions. And I think that really helped reinforce that, we are an open book. We are here for you. There's nothing you can't ask. And we want this kind of communication to be what continues going forward as we get restabilized. Yeah.
I think this is very well thought out, as evidenced by what you've already said. We talked a little bit offline about the stages of recovery, and I know that you had a whole plan, which you've already kind of talked about a bit. So where are you now?
Yeah. I think we are sort of in like the level 1 rapids, right? And we've been through the 4s and 6s. I don't even know rafting terms that much. Right? It's a different metaphor, but I think we're just sort of in the level 1 rapids where I think we're through the deep levels of uncertainty. We're through some of the emotional whiplash that comes from restructuring a team. I think the majority of our team members can now articulate our current strategy, which involves some new paid services work streams, right? Which were sort of new product offerings in another way. They can all articulate those, and they understand their role within them, and they understand our reasoning behind why we're doing that, and so they're bought in. I do want to point out that, like, while we were very well planned, we were very intentional. I mean, we got 6 thank you notes, right? Like, I think that's an indicator of that we did something about this, right? But you're never going to get it perfect. You're never going to keep everybody perfectly happy, and we do still have work to do. We are still recovering. And you don't just do one of these things and then have a good communications plan and 6 months later everybody's voting me as CEO of the year. Like, that's like not, I mean, I'll take it, but no, like, it's just not reality. And that's okay. That's where it should be, because companies are humans. They are made up of people. And we're all nuanced and complex and have different needs along the way.
Well, in the immortal words of Mike Tyson, everybody has a plan until they get punched in the face. So, ultimately, you're right. There is no such thing as a perfect plan. You can't please all the people all the time. And I can throw out any other platitudes you want. The simple fact is, and I've seen this, I've been through some pretty messy reorgs, and it's never easy. But when you don't have transparency and communication on the front end all the way through and beyond the back end, then I can tell you it never works out well. And yes, you may be through it, but there is lasting damage. This kind of communication that we're talking about for Compudopt fits in the mold of open, honest, and that's really where you need to be. So it sounds like what you did was the right thing. If I am a CEO somewhere in the country or the world listening to this, and I'm considering a reduction in force, what is one thing that you would tell me to do before I even start, what to do during, and what to do after?
I think what immediately comes to mind, and I don't mean this to be trite, I really mean it intentionally, but it's take a deep breath. You center yourself first. You are who everyone is looking to for this. They will look to you for your energy. They will look to you for your honesty. They will look to you for your stability and how you're keeping it together. And it is really hard, and you are holding all of that for everyone. So take a deep breath and make sure that you know where you are first. And I think the during piece, I'd go back to saying lean on your team. And have the open dialogues, have the open discussions, talk about how you're feeling, which is a difficult thing for me in that particular environment. Not always comfortable, but also it just helps people feel feel trusting and trusted, seen and heard. And then I think in follow-up, don't expect too much too soon. Maybe like you're also ahead of how the rest of your team will take it because you've been part of this. You've been thinking about it, anticipating it, doing all of the planning up front, and then you execute it. And in some ways, there's almost a little tiny relief valve where you're going, okay, we're through the worst of it, and now we can kind of get back on the horse. But your team is just in it. They're just in the beginning of it. So making sure that you're managing your own expectations for what you want that performance to look like in the recovery period, so to speak, and recognizing that your team is probably 2 to 3 months behind where you are in that. And just, I think keeping that top of mind can help just make sure that expectations are managed on all sides and people aren't, disappointed, and you're also managing your external expectations and the expectations of your board in such a way that you are successful, because that's what you need. You need a win out of this, right?
Right. I think that's fantastic information, and it's almost prophetic, because I was literally just having a discussion with a leader about this, saying something that along very much the same lines. You've been thinking about this for a while now, so you are farther along in the process than your team. And the other thing that I talk about a lot is with clients and with Vistage members and other Vistage chairs too, is that it's important to have people that you can lean on. You were talking about doing this with your C-suite, really leaning on their advice and everything. You can't always go to your board. It's important to have a mentor, a peer group, a coach, somebody that you can talk to as a CEO, because you can't always you can't necessarily air everything that's going on between your ears to everybody, because that's also not healthy in the process. But it sounds like you had that, which is highly important.
Yeah, I will bold and italicize that. I so deeply believe in having your own personal board of directors and other CEOs that you can turn to. And I think a unique thing about this job is you don't understand this job till you've been in this job. And the weight that you choose to carry, the weight of responsibility that you choose to carry every day alongside it is heavy. And it doesn't mean that that's a negative thing, but it is heavy. And I think, in some certain instances, really only other CEOs can understand just what that really feels like, and make space to hold space for you while you're holding space for everyone else. I'm also blessed with a just phenomenal board of directors who are more like sounding board members and are thoughtful and kind, compassionate, generous, and engaged, and really help take the weight off. And so if possible, I think, if in reflection, I think the board development work that we have done over the last years leading up to this really, really paid off, in that they were just right there with us.
That's fabulous.
Yeah,
that's fantastic. Well, I'll tell you what, we're getting close to the end of the half hour, so I would love to leave this on give me one real positive thing looking forward that you're looking at in the near future for Compudopt.
Yeah, well, we are celebrating an unbelievable milestone. We will pass 1 million, our first million people impacted in November.
That is fantastic.
Yeah. So we're
tell me you're going to do something special for this.
We are, yeah. We're having a luncheon. People can come. Of course, we're selling sponsorships and tables because we're a nonprofit, and all of that is going to fund our next million. families served, and it'll be on November 6th in the East End, and people can reach out to me if they have any interest in that. But yeah, it's a sparkly ballroom, and we're going to be doing all of the glittery things to celebrate this. It's been a long time coming, well earned, hard earned by every single member of our team and our community and our donors and our board and our volunteers, and we're really stoked about it.
Well, that's fantastic, especially for such a mission-driven organization like you are.
Yeah.
So, I mean, because the ultimate, end result of this is that families get to have, technology
Yep.
that is so needed. And I think that is absolutely fantastic. I'm thrilled to hear about how y'all have come out of this.
Thank you.
This has been a fun conversation. I really do appreciate it.
Yeah.
And so thanks for being with me.
Yeah, likewise, Richard. My honor to be here, my pleasure, and thanks again so much.
Well, thank you very much. I appreciate it. And to all of you listening, I appreciate your attention to this and to this other episode of the Nice Business Podcast. And if you want to learn how you can keep your business nice, keep tuning in. And thank you to Megan Steckly and Compudopt. Have a great day.